become involved in something worse, I gave a complete display of my narrative powers. One of us, I continued, had to stand guard while the other climbed the tree and shook out the apples. Moreover, the sack had grown so heavy that we had to open it again, leaving half the apples behind. But half an hour later we had returned and fetched the rest. When I had finished, I waited for approval of some sort. I had warmed to my subject toward the end and been carried away by my own eloquence. The two younger ones kept silent, waiting, but Franz Cromer looked sharply at me out of narrowed eyes and asked threateningly, "Is that true?" "Yes," I said. "Really and truly?" "Yes, really and truly," I insisted stubbornly while choking inwardly with fear. "Would you swear to it?" I became very afraid, but at once said yes. "Then say, 'By God and the grace of my soul.'" "By God and the grace of my soul," I said. "Well, all right," he said, and turned away. I thought everything was all right now, and was glad when he got up and turned to go home. After we had climbed back up to the bridge, I said hesitantly that I would have to head for home myself. "You can't be in that much of a hurry." Franz laughed. "We're going in the same direction, aren't we?" Slowly he ambled on, and I didn't dare run off. He was in fact walking in the direction of my house. When we stood in front of it and I saw the front door and the big brass knocker, the sun in the windows and the curtain in my mother's room, I breathed a sigh of relief. When I quickly opened the door and slipped in, reaching to slam it shut, Franz Cromer edged in behind me. In the cool, tiled passageway, lit only by one window facing the courtyard, he stood beside me, held on to me, and said softly, "Don't be in such a rush, you." I looked at him, terrified. His grip on my arm was like a vice. I wondered what he might have in mind and whether he wanted to hurt me. I tried to decide whether if I screamed now, screamed loud and piercingly, someone could come down from above quickly enough to save me. But I gave up the idea. "What is it?" I asked. "What do you want?" "Nothing much. I only wanted to ask you something. The others don't have to hear it." "Oh, really?" "I can't think of anything to say to you. I have to go up, you know." Softly, Franz Cromer asked, "You know who owns the orchard by the mill, don't you?" "I'm not sure. The miller, I think." Franz had put his arm around me, and now he drew me so close I was forced to look into his face inches away. His eyes were evil. He smiled maliciously. His face was filled with cruelty and a sense of power. "Well, I can tell you for certain whose orchard that is. I've known for some time that someone had stolen apples there, and that the man who owns it said he'd give 2 marks to anyone who'd tell him who swiped them." "Oh my God!" I exclaimed. "You wouldn't do that, would you?" I felt it would be useless to appeal to his sense of honor. He came from the other world. Betrayal was no crime to him. I sensed this acutely. The people from the other world were not like us in these matters. "Not say anything?" laughed Cromer. "Kid, what do you take me for? Do you think I own a mint? I'm poor. I don't have a wealthy father like you, and if I can earn 2 marks, I earn them any way I can. Maybe he'll even give me more." Suddenly, he let go of me. The passageway no longer smelled of peace and safety. The world around me began to crumble. He would give me away to the police. I was a criminal. My father would be informed. Perhaps even the police would come. All the dread of chaos threatened me. Everything ugly and dangerous was united against me. It meant nothing that I'd filched nothing. I'd sworn I had. Tears welled up in my eyes. I felt I had to strike a bargain, and desperately I groped through all my pockets. Not a single apple, no pocket knife. I had nothing at all. I thought of my watch, an old silver watch that didn't work, that I wore just for the fun of it. It had been my grandmother's. Quickly, I took it off. I said, "Cromer, listen. Don't give me away. It wouldn't be fair if you did. I'll give you my watch as a present. Here, take a look. Otherwise, I've nothing at all. You can have it. It's made of silver. And the works, well, there's something slightly wrong with them. You have to have it fixed." He smiled and weighed the watch in his palm. I looked at his hand and felt how brutal and deeply hostile it was to me, how it reached for my life and peace. "It's made of silver," I said hesitantly. "I don't give a damn for your silver and your old watch," he said scornfully. "Get it fixed yourself." "But Franz," I exclaimed, trembling with fear that he might run away. Wait a moment. Why don't you take it? It's really made of silver, honest, and I don't have anything else." He threw me a cold, scornful look. "Well, you know who I'll go to. Or I could go to the police, too. I'm on good terms with the sergeant." He turned as if to go. I held on to his sleeve. I couldn't allow him to go. I would rather have died than suffer what might happen if he went off like that. "Franz," I implored, hoarse with excitement, "don't do anything foolish. You're only joking, aren't you?" "Yes, I'm joking, but it could turn into an expensive joke. Just tell me what I'm supposed to do, Franz. I'll do anything you ask." He looked me up and down with narrowed eyes and laughed again. "Don't be so stupid," he said with false good humor. "You know as well as I that I'm in a position to earn 2 marks. I'm not a rich man who can afford to throw them away, but you're rich. You even have a watch. All you have to do is give me 2 marks. Then everything will be all right." I understood his logic. But 2 marks. That was as much and as unattainable as 10, as 100, as 1,000. I didn't have a pfennig. There was a piggy bank that my mother kept for me. When relatives came to visit, they would drop in 5 or 10 pfennig pieces. That was all I had. I had no allowance at that time. "I just don't have any," I said sadly. "I don't have any money at all. But I'll give you everything else I have. I have a western, tin soldiers, and a compass. Wait, I'll get them for you." Cromer's mouth merely twisted into a brief sneer. Then he spit on the floor. Harshly, he said, "You can keep your crap. A compass. Don't make me mad. You hear? I'm after money. But I don't have any. I never get any. I can't help it." "All right. Then you'll bring me the 2 marks tomorrow. I'll wait for you after school down near the marketplace. That's all. You'll see what'll happen if you don't bring it." "But where am I going to get it if I don't have any?" "There's plenty of money in your house. That's your business. Tomorrow after school. And I'm telling you, if you don't have it with you—" He threw me a withering look, spit once more, and vanished like a shadow. I couldn't even get upstairs. My life was wrecked. I thought of running away and never coming back, or of drowning myself. However, I couldn't picture any of this very clearly. In the dark, I sat down on the bottom step of our staircase, huddled up within myself, abandoning myself to misery. That's where Lena found me weeping as she came downstairs with the basket to fetch wood. I begged her not to say a word. Then I went upstairs. To the right of the glass door hung my father's hat and my mother's parasol. They gave me a feeling of home and comfort, and my heart greeted them thankfully, as the prodigal son might greet the sight and smell of old familiar rooms. But all of it was lost to me now. All of it belonged to the clear, well-lighted world of my father and mother, and I, guilty and deeply engulfed in an alien world, was entangled in adventures and sin, threatened by an enemy by dangers, fear, and shame. The hat and parasol, the old sandstone floor I was so fond of, the broad picture above the hall cupboard, the voice of my elder sister coming to me from the living room were all more moving, more precious, more delicious than ever before. But they had ceased to be a refuge and something I could rely on. They had become an unmistakable reproach. None of this was mine anymore. I could no longer take part in its quiet cheerfulness. My feet had become muddied. I could not even wipe them clean on the mat. Everywhere I went, I was followed by a darkness of which this world of home knew nothing. How many secrets I had had, how often I had been afraid, but all of it had been child's play compared with what I brought home with me today. I was haunted by misfortune. It was reaching out toward me so that not even my mother could protect me, since she was not even allowed to know. Whether my crime I was stealing or lying, hadn't I sworn a false oath by God and everything that was sacred, was immaterial. My sin was not specifically this or that, but consisted of having shaken hands with the devil. Why had I gone along? Why had I obeyed Cromer better even than I had ever obeyed my father? Why had I invented the story, building myself up with a crime as though it were a heroic act? The devil held me in his clutches. The enemy was behind me. For the time being, I was not so much afraid of what would happen tomorrow as of the horrible certainty that my way, from now on, would lead farther and farther downhill into darkness. I felt acutely that new offenses were bound to grow out of this one offense, that my presence among my sisters, greeting and kissing my parents, were a lie, that I was living a lie concealed deep inside myself. For a moment, hope and confidence flickered up inside me as I gazed at my father's hat. I would tell him everything, would accept his verdict and his punishment, and would make him into my confessor and savior. It would only be a penance, the kind I had often done, a bitterly difficult hour, a ruefully difficult request for forgiveness. How sweet and tempting that sounded. But it was no use. I knew I wouldn't do it. I knew I now had a secret, a sin which I would have to expiate alone. Perhaps I stood at the parting of the ways. Perhaps I would now belong among the wicked forever, share their secrets, depend on them, obey them, have to become one of their kind. I had acted the man and hero, now I had to bear the consequences. I was glad when my father took me to task for my muddy boots. It diverted his attention by sidestepping the real issue and placed me in a position to endure reproaches that I could secretly transfer to the other, the more serious offense. A strange new feeling overcame me at this point, a feeling that stung pleasurably. I felt superior to my father. Momentarily, I felt a certain loathing for his ignorance. His upbraiding me for muddy boots seemed pitiful. If you only knew, crossed my mind as I stood there like a criminal being cross-examined for a stolen loaf of bread when the actual crime was murder. It was an odious, hostile feeling, but it was strong and deeply attractive, and shackled me more than anything else to my secret and my guilt. I thought Cromer might have gone to the police by now and denounced me, that thunderstorms were forming above my head, while all this time they continued to treat me like a little child. This moment was the most significant and lasting of the whole experience. It was the first rent in the holy image of my father. It was the first fissure in the columns that had upheld my childhood, which every individual must destroy before he can become himself. The inner, the